Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Small Township Board of Education meeting, for which adequate notice under the Open Public Meetings Act was provided by a notice to the Township Administrator's Office, all Wall Township Public Schools, the Co-Star, Asbury Park Press, and a posting in the Board Administration Office on November 21, 2019. I'll take a roll call. Mr. Gartz?
Here.
Mr. Hall? Here. Mr. Krupa?
Here.
Ms. Mangan?
Here.
Mr. Nasser?
Here.
Mr. Sanfilippo?
Here.
Mr. Wondrak? Here. Mr. Adenizio?
Here. Thank you. All right, at this time, we will move on to number 5, interviews to fill the Board of Education seat. And we just need our first person, who is, Ms. Cross. Good evening. I am going to ask you 4 questions. It'll be the same 4 questions that we ask everybody, so it's fair that way. So what is your understanding of the role of the Board of Education and the role of a board member?
The role for the board member would be to oversee hiring of the superintendent, spending the money best of the $77 million budget, policy, and right now the most important, I think, thing that we're working on is the hiring of the new superintendent.
Okay. What do you see as the biggest challenges facing the board and the biggest challenges facing the district?
Transparency is a big issue, I think, right now. I think the district has lost some respect from the community, and they haven't gotten it back yet, and it's been going on for a number of years. So I think that's one of the biggest issues that the district is facing. I've been going to Board of Education members' meetings for 9 years now, so I mean I've attended over 100 meetings, and we're in a place right now where I think the communication really needs to improve. So that's why I decided after the 6th Board of Education person resigned in 2019 that I had no choice but to put my name in. So this is my 4th time applying for an open seat, and I think I'm the most qualified, but I guess we'll see what you think.
Okay. What skills, qualities, and experiences would you bring to the board? And please discuss any previous community or nonprofit experience.
I'm kind of a numbers person, so I think I could help out with the budget. I'm a good listener. I usually don't go back and have to listen to the meetings, but I've been going to meetings for a long time now, and I've looked at the past. I've been to every budget presentation in the past 9 years. I've looked at the last 9 audit reports. I come to every meeting, I ask questions. I think I ask good questions. I think there's always a mix of people, but I think you need a new somebody behind the scenes now that actually knows what's going on. I think what we don't need right now is another new person to the board, and we'd have the 7th new person in just 2019. So I think I'm gonna be a quick learner on what happens on the other side. And, you know, I could tackle anything, be very well prepared. When you get your packets, I think you have to come in here and be ready to go. Like, sometimes I'm kind of surprised with some of the questions that people ask. It looks like they didn't even look through the agenda. You know, I take my time, day of the meeting, I look through it, and I come with my questions, and a lot of times I get cut off because I just can't get to them. So, those would, I think, are my most important skills that I could be to the board right now.
Okay. And which of our current district initiatives do you find most valuable or are you most excited about at this time?
I like the technology, the one-on-one Chromebooks. I think that's been good. One that, the community outreach I was excited about, but you haven't really involved the community. So we just can't keep putting these things on paper and then not follow through with them. I think we need to have better procedures in place. You're hearing a lot of things about bullying these days. I think you have to have better procedures in place with the schools about what happens after an incident happens. In terms of initiatives, those are the only two I can think of.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add?
I'm sure I do. Yeah, I think we have to be, you know, we've got the affordable housing issue going on and the infrastructure. We have so many issues with the infrastructure. And so much money is spent on salaries, pensions, and benefits that the little bit of money you have to look to spend it the best way you possibly can. You've got to get bids even though you don't have to. You got to, you know, those F&F reports should have, you know, who the vendor was, what the date was that it came in. We have to have documents signed and dated. I mean, here we are 9 years later. I've been saying the same things over and over again. I just can't even understand it. But, I mean, you know, after this last resignation, I said, let me put my name in again. But this is my fourth time, and I think I'm the most qualified to be on the board, but we'll see what you decide.
Okay, thank you. When 2013 was the last time you put your name in?
I don't have the exact date, but this is my fourth time, so.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I discussed this with my husband. We're all on board. Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We're going to ask you the same 4 questions that we're going to ask everybody to keep it fair. So start. What is your understanding of the role of the Board of Education and the role of the board member? Oh, I am so sorry.
That's okay. My name is Lisa Adam, Wall Township resident for 16 years, 3 children in the district currently.
Apologize for that.
That's okay.
Okay. So we'll start. What is your understanding of the role of the Board of Education and the role of a board member?
My understanding of the role of the Board of Education is to set goals for the district, adopt policies, and revise policies that help us achieve those goals, as well as adopt and oversee a budget as a Board of Ed member, to hold ourselves accountable to the district, to the students and teachers and members of the town, as well as work together as a team to meet the goals that we have set and be flexible enough to know when they need to be changed.
Okay. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing the board and the biggest challenge facing the district?
The biggest challenge, I think, when it comes to conceptually, I think that we obviously have an infrastructure that we have work to do. We have aging buildings and an aging infrastructure. We have to adopt a budget that will maintain the facilities as well as adapt to the future of learning, making our schools available to the children in a future, keeping up with the future and keeping up with modern technology while working with an older infrastructure. I think as board members, one of our biggest challenges is working with the public, taking the vision of the town and working as best we can with trust and transparency as any public figure.
Okay. What skills, qualities, and experiences would you bring to the board? And please discuss any previous community or nonprofit experience.
Nonprofit experience, I am the president and co-founder of a nonprofit called Colton and Friends, a foundation for autism. So I have some experience in the nonprofit sector. Community experience, I was a PTA of the Cape for 8 years, as well as served as the president of that for 3 years. So I know how to work with the parents. I see things, I have 3 children in the district, and I have 3 very different children. So I see things from the perspective of a parent as well as someone who has the best interest of the district at heart. I work very well, I'm adaptable, so I understand that things aren't always easy. They aren't always black and white, and we have to work really hard to maintain trust, and I'm very, very good at seeing things with a different perspective. I am a consummate volunteer. I've served on committees on the Board of Ed. I was on the committee for the closing of West Belmar School. I was on the committee when they discussed full-day kindergarten. So I have dabbled a little bit with the board, but never had an opportunity, time to be where I am right now. But volunteer-wise, I've served on many boards in town and given a lot of time.
Okay. And which of our current district initiatives do you find most valuable or are you most excited about at this time?
I love that we are doing a facility study to see, to move things around, to make more room for better learning, for better classroom experience with the libraries and the media centers. I think that that's really exciting. I think that we've done a lot with the future of education, and I think that doing the facility studies and moving forward with that is a great initiative right now.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, just that I'm excited for the opportunity, grateful that I had the chance to be here, and looking forward to either working with you or being here to watch whoever you choose.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am going to ask you the same 4 questions that we've asked everybody to keep it fair.
Okay.
And please just introduce yourself to everyone.
Okay, I am Megan Sullivan. I have been a Wall Township resident for 20 years. I am a teacher for MOESC. I have been on the Wall Alliance for the past 2.5 years, and I am very active in the community, and I really care about students and their families.
Okay, thank you. All right. What is your understanding of the role of the Board of Education and the role of a board member?
The role of the board member is to meet as what is required to help run the school district and make decisions that are on the best, what is best for the community at large, especially the students.
Okay. What do you see as the biggest challenges facing the board and the biggest challenge facing the district?
The biggest challenge, I would say, is always comes down to finances and what can be accomplished with the budgets and the goals for the district. And there are certainly some challenges as far as, from my understanding, with the trailers and whatnot, but there's also some wonderful, wonderful things about this township that I'm really happy that I'm part of this township. But it all comes down to financially what can be done.
Okay. What skills, qualities, and experiences would you bring to the board? And please discuss any previous community or nonprofit experience.
I am a very hardworking, dedicated, detail-oriented, caring individual. I have served on student government in college, and most recently have gone on to the Wall Alliance Committee about 2.5 years ago.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I consider myself.
Oh, I apologize. I missed one.
Sure.
Which of the current district initiatives do you find most valuable or are you most excited about at this time?
I like the overall approach of the districts of putting their students first. I think they're trying to have as many opportunities for students to grow. And that's pretty much what I think the overall background of the district is. It's all about the kids.
Okay. Now, is there anything else you'd like to add?
As I said, I've been a teacher since 2007 for MOESC. I've lived in the community for 20 years. I have really been thrilled at the approach of the Wall Township School District and how they handle things and how they approach things with students, and I would love the opportunity to serve.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So, at this time, could I have a motion to go into executive session for under number 6, A, G, and H?
Make that motion.
Could I have a second? All in favor? Okay. We'll be back by 8 p.m. call the meeting back to order. Please stand for the flag salute.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Mr. Smythe.
Mr. Gartz?
Here.
Mr. Hall? Here. Mr. Krupa? Here. Ms. Mangan?
Here.
Mr. Nasser? Here. Mr. Sanfilippo?
Here.
Mr. Wondrak? Here. Mr. Adenizio?
Here. Thank you. So at this time, the board did not come to a unanimous consensus on the board vacancy. What we are going to do is repost the position. All candidates that did apply are going to carry over to the next part of the process. They do not need to reapply, to be clear. And the board will, after we get any additional candidates, have another interview process and then weigh all the candidates together. So that's going to take place shortly. At this time, I am going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Sanfilippo, who's going to handle the superintendent search. I am recusing myself due to a conflict having a family member that works in the district.
Excuse me, Mr. Adenizio, could I also be excused for the remainder of the meeting?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good evening. Okay. So tonight we're going to hear proposals from vendors for the superintendent search, and we'll just get right to it. The first up is going to be RPAT Solutions.
I actually, my wife knows one of your board members, so I have to say hello. Linda says hello. My name is Dr. Robert Rosado. I'm with the firm RPAT Solutions. Not a very inventive name. The R is for Rosado, the Pat is for my partner, Dr. James Patterson. Unfortunately, he's on vacation this week, and a lot smarter than we are since he's in St. Bart's and I'm here, 22 degrees versus 85 degrees. Let me tell you about RPAT Solutions. We've been conducting superintendent searches in New Jersey for 22 years. Our work is strictly in New Jersey. We have conducted searches in districts as small as Alpine and Haworth, Clinton, and as large as Perth, Amboy, and West Orange. Most recently, we completed searches in Milburn, Tenafly, in the smaller side, Haworth, Upper Saddle River, and most recently, we're completing searches in Springfield, Rivervale, and Rochelle Park. I think if we're going to look at firms in terms of how we look at ourselves as a firm, we are a firm that conduct all our own work. There's the two principals, so all the interviews, all the processes that go with the superintendent search are conducted by the two principals of the firm for 22 years. I believe we're the longest serving firm with the same two principals in New Jersey right now. Typically, we do 3 to 4, possibly 5 searches in a given school year. That's by design. We don't feel, since there are only 2 of us doing the searches, we don't like to spread ourselves too thin. So because of that, we take only a few cases each year, a few superintendent searches throughout the state. I think of our homework for our firm, if we're going to look at one, is our ability to pick a person and fit them into the district in terms of the candidates that we go forward. Typically, if you hire our firm, we will hold your hands from the beginning to the end of the search if you haven't been involved in this process before. We look at candidates throughout the state. Because we are a private firm, we also recruit candidates. The only candidates we don't recruit are candidates that we've already placed in superintendencies. We feel that would be unethical, obviously. Things that separate us, I think, from other firms, for example, we have the most extensive online survey search that you can look at. The document, we actually used that last time 7 years ago when we were here. Typically, the responses, if I recall, you had well over 1,000 responses, And the information generated from our copyrighted survey is one that will give you the type of character that you're looking for, the type of person you're looking for in terms of the superintendency. The data is collected from all your constituent groups. We give you that report back in terms of a breakdown of how each group looked at the candidates, the type of qualities the candidates are looking for. We'll come to your district. We usually spend a day or two in the district meeting with the teachers, the parents, the administrators, and all the board members. After we complete that process, if you wind up hiring our firm, we'll talk about dates for scheduling the superintendent search. Typically, if you haven't been through this process before, people are always wondering why, in business we can take 2 or 3 weeks to hire somebody or a month. Superintendent search is much more extensive simply because of the termination clauses in superintendent's contracts, for example. Typically, by state law, the average principal teacher has a 60-day termination clause. Most of your superintendents in their contracts either have 90 or 120-day termination clauses. So if you work backwards, and if you want to have someone in the position by July 1st, that means you have to really give them a contract around March 1st to get a 90 or 120-day clause out of the way. Working backwards from that, you need about 6 to 8 weeks to advertise the position, to conduct the interviews, and for that information. So now you're really back in January. In fact, as the 2 searches that we're working on right now that we're completing are for July 1st, and we're actually setting up interviews for those searches already going forward. So you're just about on the timeline to make it there, but time would be of the essence going forward at the school district, especially if you want someone to start by July 1st. I think the other unique factor that we have, if you look at our proposal, we know that picking a superintendent is not easy. We understand that, which is why in any field of candidates, you may not agree on one candidate because the candidates may be so strong that 5 of you may want one or 4 may want the other, or you may have 2 or 3 that you like. So that if you can't come to a consensus as a board, we actually go out within a year's time at no cost, additional cost to the Board of Education. We haven't had to use it that often, quite frankly. I think in the 22 years that we've been doing this, we've only had 1 Board of Education not hire a candidate from the list of candidates we presented. That was actually an interesting case. It was on a 5-4 vote. It was our 2nd year in business. And at the board meeting, 500 people came to the board meeting and asked the board how you picked that candidate. It happened to be the former board president, who they appointed as superintendent, happened to be an administrator as well. That candidate, and then to the board's credit, they actually did admit to the public that that was not a candidate that we provided. Other than that, our candidates have usually either retired or been renewed from a contract or gone on to a new position from whatever position that they've been placed in by our firm. And I think that track record speaks for itself, and I think that's why we wind up getting about 99% of our business is strictly on referral basis. And that is why we do turn down some of the positions, because we don't like to do more than 2 or 3 searches at a time during the course of the year. If you do hire our firm, we will just have completed the other 2 searches that we're working on, so we'd be at your disposal for the rest of that process. I will tell you that this is the time to get ahead of the curve in terms of what's going on. With the salary cap being lifted, you should have a wealth of candidates applying for the position going across the board. And looking forward and to the type of people that you're looking for, we will spend that time with you talking about those candidates. Our electronic survey will give you that information in terms of what type of candidates you need for the firm, for the superintendency. And quite frankly, that fit is what we pride ourselves on, picking that 5 to 8 candidates that will get to you. And if we don't feel, for example, that we have those candidates, that contract works both ways, we will come and tell you, we don't feel that we have enough candidates that are an excellent fit for your school district, and we'll go back out and ask you to re-advertise and go forward and include those candidates in the search going forward, but we'll also look at new candidates to make sure that you have the right pool of candidates you feel are a good fit going forward. And that's basically the crux of what we do for a firm. We have about 90 years of experience between my partner and I. My background is mathematics. I've been a principal and a superintendent and an administrator, a teacher at every single level from K to 12. I was also, my partner also has that same experience roughly, and his background is human resources. He's an arts person, he's a music person. I'm a person who has a background in mathematics. So that covers our look in terms of looking at a person who has a background in arts and the sciences as well going forward. Any questions from the board?
Does anybody at the board have any questions?
So I noticed most of the districts are actually in Bergen County that you work with. How would you feel for our district in Wall, being in Monmouth County, that you'd be a good fit?
Well, we did your district 7 years ago, so we know it extensively. I live over in Long Branch, so I know the area pretty well. We actually have done Union Beach down here as well. They simply, the reason why we probably have done more Bergen County, there are 80 districts in Bergen County. And our first referrals came from there, and since basically all our work's on a referral basis, we tend to be referred there. But most recently, we just completed West Orange, Essex County. We're doing Springfield and Union County. So it really depends on where people refer us. And since we are strictly a referral business, it tends to be more in that area at this moment. So that's, and the fact that we have a background with your district anyway, I think would put us well positioned to go forward.
Can you go through the process of finding and recruiting the candidates? Obviously, we have to advertise, but how do you identify?
Sure, there's
target?
2 ways we identify candidates. One is simply, and it's funny, you know, superintendents, even the most high-tech superintendent, majority of superintendents look at the firm's website as well as the Star Ledger, believe it or not. In fact, I would tell you, regardless of what firm you would hire, I wouldn't waste my time advertising the New York Times. A lot of money for 2% of the candidates you may get. 90%, 95% of the candidates who are out of state will look at New Jersey, NJASA's website. All of our stuff goes on to a national website, which is run actually by a larger search firm called Hazard Young Natia. They cull their candidates from our website, their advertisements from that. And the other part of what we do is we recruit directly with candidates from different superintendencies. We do a mass mailing to all the people in the, let's say, surrounding within an hour's drive of your district. And we also recruit candidates that we've met throughout the other search processes and other superintendents who may be interested in looking for superintendency or a change of venue. You know, typically, in a district this size, you're going to get about 50 to 60% of your candidates who are sitting superintendents in the school district who are just interested in a change.
I have a question, Dr. Rosado. With regards to being inclusive with this search in terms of the input and criteria that we're looking for as a district, how do you bring in all the stakeholders, or how are you going to help us with that process?
That works for us on 2 parts. The spending the day in the district and meeting with all the stakeholders is a big part of what we do. But probably the largest part, and especially in the last 14 years that we've been using the electronic survey that we use, it takes about 7 or 8 minutes to fill it out. It's rather extensive. It gives you every characteristic of leadership, every type of situation you might encounter in a school district. You'll be able to use that as a board, as a document, as a living document, in terms of discussing with the public why you selected a candidate. You get some very interesting information. It is done on a strictly anonymous basis. There's an extensive comment section. We often joke that when we retire from doing this, we're going to publish the comment section as a book, just to see what people say. And the interesting part of the comment section is it really gives you a detailed analysis of what people are thinking about your school district, about issues that you have in the district, whether it's in special education, whether it's about finance, regardless of the issue. So that electronic survey, typically, if I remember the last time that we used it here, you had well over 1,000 responses across the board. About 60% came from your teaching staff, which is constituted a portion, but you probably had 600 or 700 responses from the community at least across that time. And you use that data actually as you interviewed candidates going forward. And I think that information is what is the most valuable because it really gives you a clear picture of what every constituent group is thinking of. That's why we actually copyrighted the survey, because that's something that we've used extensively and it has given the board the most opportunity. You know, typically, even when we come to visit the district, you know, teachers always come out, the administrators come out, but parent evenings, even in the largest districts we've ever done, we typically don't get a large parent turnout. And simply because the electronic survey is so extensive and gives so much good information to the board, you know, in this day and age, if you can do something from your home, the fact is you can do it on your cell phone. The survey is that friendly, user-friendly. It gives you that much time to get input from your community that you usually don't get from all your constituent groups. And we'll give you the report back in a few ways. One way is just the total information, but then we'll break it out by each constituent group. So you'll see what the teachers are thinking, what the community members are thinking, what parents are thinking. And if you decide, we always ask the board members to take it, you can see what the board members are, as your own colleagues are thinking as well.
And then just one more question with regards to the candidate pool that you were talking about. What is the difference, if there is any, in terms of handling internal candidates?
Internal candidates, we really speak to the board about. Typically, most boards tend to ask us to measure the candidates against the candidates that are in the pool, and having it go straight forward from that point. Are they strong enough to make the pool as one of the semifinalists, or are they not strong enough to go with that? And that's information that's out, we just shared with the board going forward. The other thing we don't do is we don't rank our candidates. You know, people will often ask us, why don't you just tell us who you think are the best candidates? Frankly, we don't live here. And you as a board have the pulse on the community, and you understand what the right fit's going to be. So we're going to present you with 6 to 8 candidates, all who are excellent people who can do your job. The fit for you is the important part, who you think, you know, oftentimes we often talk about how we run, you know, the interview process. We'll help you with that as well, in terms of how you drill down from 6 to 8 candidates down to 2 or 3, so that you can move forward with someone that you feel, whoever he or she may be, that'll be successful going into the next round of interviews. But we've often found, my partner and I often joke, we never are very accurate at picking the person who's going to get the job, because oftentimes a board will come after the first round and say, well, these are our top 3 people, and this is how they rank 1, 2, and 3. And after they go to a more extensive interview, usually about an hour to hour and a half, sometimes it'll reverse itself completely. And they'll find that the person who was number 1 the first day, after a more extensive meeting with the board members, has dropped down to number 3 or vice versa. So I think that process and the ability that we have been doing this for 22 years in terms of helping you with the interview process, will help you with questions for the candidates as well. So that comes through in the recruitment process, but it also comes through in the selection process.
Mr. Rosado, you mentioned you do about 3 to 5 searches per year. Is that
That's
what
correct.
you said? So in your RFP searches and your referrals that you receive, how many districts do you turn down, or is it just that you're taking the 3 or 5 that come at your, in a calendar year?
We turned down 2 in the past month.
Okay. Under what premise would you turn them down?
One was just further than we felt like traveling. It was all the way down by Atlantic City,
Mhm.
that area. And the other district asked us to meet with every board member individually on separate interviews, and we felt that was divisive. That's not what our firm is about. We felt that when we meet with the board, we meet with the entire board to get everyone's opinion in an open session, and we felt it would be against our the best interest of the board and the public to meet with every board member individually and hold secrets apart. That was something that we would do as a firm.
And the other question would be, you mentioned a lot of great attributes of your company. So what would be the one thing that differentiates you from some of the folks that are here tonight?
I think our ability to find the fit, the best people that fit for the position.
Thank you.
I have a quick question for you, too.
Sure.
Could you speak to maybe some best practices that you feel that your firm employs in terms of finding the best fit for the district and identifying the needs of the district?
I think that all stems from the electronic survey that we conduct, because that gives us a tremendous amount of background data on the type of candidates we're looking for, that and the meeting with the board. And oftentimes if we find that the board gets a little surprised by the survey, quite frankly. It says we're looking at candidates, and they see the data that comes from the survey. They may think that, let's say, technology and social emotional growth were the most important things in the district, and they had a great program, yet people would say, we had this and now it's not in place as much anymore and we're losing our focus on that. So it actually gives you a chance to look at your strategic plan and say, is the community seeing our strategic plan? Are we communicating well as a board? So that, I think, gives us that entire difference, and that's really, if you're going to talk about something that pinpoints to your question, would be that ability to draw from that survey information and the meetings we have with the public and the community when we come to your school district, that gives us that edge in terms of how we decide on how we look at the candidates.
One follow-up question.
Sure.
You said most of your clients, or many of your clients, or a good number of your clients, I forget what you said, tend to retire from the districts that they've been
Retire
placed in.
or they've been promoted.
Right. So do you have any data about the length of years served from the majority of your placements?
Typically, it's anywhere between 6 to 8 years.
6 to 8 years. Thank you.
Average stay for superintendents in the district, in school districts now is 2.8 years
Right.
across the state. I heard somebody in public say 2.8. That's, unfortunately, that is, and it hasn't changed, by the way, much from when superintendents had tenure, it was 2.7 years. So it's been about the same over the last 35 years.
Do we have any more questions from the board? No? I thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. Have a good evening.
Next, we'd like to have Dr. Franciscini.
Good evening. First of all, my background, a lot of you know most of it. Prior to my becoming a chief school administrator, I was actually I was a superintendent and business administrator down in Gloucester County. I've been a teacher. I'm presently an educational advisor for a law firm that deals strictly with special education law. And I worked for school boards after I retired as superintendent of schools. I've also served as interim superintendent in several districts. And unlike Dr. Rosado's firm, I've only participated in 5 superintendent searches. I've done superintendent searches in Homedale, Farmingdale, Bradley Beach, and Paulsboro, New Jersey, including Wall Township too. I'm basically a person of Wall. I never knew about Wall until 37 years ago when my wife and I moved here with some intimidation, but we stayed for 37 years. And when I retired, we looked all around the country. We looked in California, we looked in Arizona and Nevada and South Carolina and Florida, all the places that you look for retirement. And we chose Wall Township, in which we built a house, and we stayed there for 20 years. And then, unfortunately, we had to move 2 years ago, well, less than 2 years ago, for some personal problems. Unlike what Dr. Rosado's firm does, I do want to meet with individual board members. I want to know what they would like to see in a superintendent, not from a piece of paper or answers to a question, but in a general conversation. That conversation could be 10 minutes long, it could be a half hour long. I don't care. I live nearby, and consequently, time is not of the essence to me. I don't charge by the hour, and so I would like to know what each of you think without the influence of hearing what your next door, the person next to you thinks. I don't want you to be influenced by that person. I want to know specifically what you're looking for in a superintendent. I also intend to meet, if I were chosen, I would intend to meet with the administrative staff. And then I would meet with the teachers, not en masse, but probably in their faculty rooms at each of the individual schools. And they would know this ahead of time, and I would want to know from them what kind of superintendent they would like to see, what kind of attributes they'd like to see in that person. And I think that's very important, because next to the kids, who are the ultimate benefactors of the superintendent, the teachers are the ones that are going to be responsible for carrying on what that superintendent decides. As far as the public is concerned, I agree, the public tends not to come to big mass meetings. If I were invited to coffee klatches, I would go, even though it would be a smaller group of people, maybe 5 or 6 or 10 people at a coffee klatch. But if I were invited by people from the community to attend one of these things to talk about this, I would certainly be amenable to that. I would like to know some things. For example, how many finalists would you like to see? Where is your budget for this thing? Obviously, I agree with Dr. Rosado, who's left, that the New York Times is not the place to advertise. But I think you do have to make a decision on whether you want to restrict your search to simply New Jersey or the tri-state area or nationally. That's an important decision and certainly has to be reflected in whatever your budget is. If your budget is $500, we're going to advertise in the Asbury Park Press, or maybe the Star Ledger. But obviously, you have to make that kind of decision, and that will depend on where I would advertise. As far as details on the kinds of things that my past or that you would like to know about, I'd be glad to let you know. I should advise you, however, and I should have said this at the outset, you should be aware that at one point, after I retired, I found it necessary to sue the Board of Education. And I just want to be open with that. The Board of Education ended up giving me $5 million. No, not really. As a matter of fact, Mr. Gross was on the board side then. But seriously, if any of you have any questions, I would, rather than me go off on a monologue, I'd rather address your questions. And seeing none, no, seriously, does anybody have any questions?
Questions for Dr. Fettuccini?
So being in terms that you've held superintendent searches in other districts, what are some ways you engage the community besides actively interviewing the teachers and getting input there, but our community members in Wall?
Well, like I said, the main way I would try to communicate, if you would want, I would be glad to hold a public meeting just to get input from the public. I don't think it's very effective from the districts in which I have done searches. The only one that I saw was affected was in Farmingdale, which is a very, very small community with less than 150 kids in the school. But at that school, I probably had 250 people from the public show up at the meeting to give input, which is unusual. I remember sitting in here when you did this superintendent search after, I guess it was after Ed Miklas. And we sat right in here, and the person who was doing the search, and we had about 40 or 50 people in the audience then. And if I could get audiences like that, I'd be glad to have a public meeting. But on top of that, it would be strictly from coffee klatches, anywhere I can get public interested in providing their opinions, I would certainly be amenable to that.
Doctor, your experience here in Wall, obviously your passion and energy for the town, in your eyes, is an advantage or a possible disadvantage in this work?
Well, it's like I was saying to one of the representatives from school districts here, your superintendent of schools, it's like being a referee in a football game or an ump in baseball. Both sides don't always agree with your decision. And when you make decisions, guess what? You don't get 100% people saying, yes, that was a good decision. You don't get that. You're going to get people that like it, people that don't like it. And that will always occur. If you're worth your salt as a superintendent, I think the person has to be able to make that kind of decision and not just be a milquetoast kind of person who's simply going to look at what does the board want, what does the community want, what do the teachers want, whatever. One of the hardest decisions I ever had to make was to fire a football coach. And it was a very successful football coach as far as football was concerned. And I had reasons, and I had a lot of opposition. I remember my secretary at the time calling me. I was at a school visiting, And she said, you better come here. We have some parents that want to talk to you. And when I came, I felt like Daniel in the lion's den. I was totally surrounded by about 300 people. But my decision carried. It carried with the board. It carried eventually with the community. But not with the football team.
I'd like to ask them the same questions I asked earlier with a little bit of a different vein in terms of including some of the things that you said that may have clarified. So on the community input portion, the in-person contact, talking to people, and looking at all those stakeholders, the input from computer-generated surveys, is that something that you would utilize in your approach?
You know, I've never done it. As a result, I am going to look at Dr. Rosado's website, even though it's copywritten survey, I'm just going to look at it just to see if it appeals to me. May or may not. I will look for the possibility. I would look depending upon. Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. I would look at depending again, like I said, are you looking for a statewide search? Are you looking for a tri-county-wide or national search? So a lot of that would depend on that kind of thing. Otherwise, I still intend to do something on the computer, but whether it's some known sites that deal with searches for various kinds of professions, or whether it's simply matter of fact, a lot of the newspapers, including the Star Ledger and, I don't think the Asbury Park, the APP doesn't have it, and I don't think Atlantic City has it, or the Courier, but the Courier Post may have it. Philadelphia Inquirer may have it, I'm not sure, but they have some online kinds of searches available to them.
And then the other question that I asked before was, what's your approach in dealing with internal candidates?
Matter of fact, I anticipate quite a few internal candidates. Just the people I know, and I don't know a lot of people, to be honest with you, anymore. And I know some people who have retired who may apply, but what my approach is, I think their candidacy is just as valid and maybe has a leg up depending upon what the board's intention are. For example, the board that hired me, they wanted somebody that never even heard of Wall Township, and they found them. I never heard of Wall Township. I remember they said, you just go past Great Adventure and you'll come up with it, and they told me what to look for. And I'm driving, and I said, pretty soon I'm going to hit the ocean. And I came up here on a miserable Saturday in March, and I didn't know where I was, and I resolved I'm not taking this job even if it's offered to me. It was a drizzly Saturday. But, it depends. It really depends on who the person is and what you want in it. If you want somebody that you don't want an internal candidate individually when I talk to you, I have to take that into consideration as to who I'm going to put up before you as finalists. That's a good question, though.
Thank you.
Hypothetical question. You have 30 candidates. You need to get down to 5. Describe the process that you go through to get and winnow out everybody to get to those final 5.
All right, well, it's sort of like I have to know where you want to get to. By you, I mean the board, the administration, the teachers, the public, what you would like to see in a superintendent. Now, once I know what that goal is or those goals are, then I have to assess the individuals, whether it's 30 or 50 people. I have to assess how far along they are toward that, or if they have all the qualifications, some of the qualifications, whatever. And I intend to determine that in my individual interviews with them. And At that point is where I make the decision. This person is closest to achieving the goal line than the person out here on the 40-yard line. Person can't even kick a field goal that far. So I have to make that kind of decision. And that's how I would do it. It's simply a subjective matter. You try to make it as objective as you want, but it's very difficult to be totally objective. And I don't know if you want to be totally objective. You don't want to decide things, even though as my predecessor and his partner are mathematics teachers, and I've always been a math science teacher. But as much as you're into that, you don't want your decision simply based on the addition and subtraction of numbers. There's personalities that have to be taken into effect. There are all kinds of subjective kinds of things you have to determine in that personal interview.
I have a question. I actually wrote whittling down process on here as my question, so Adam, thank you for stealing my question, but I did have a follow-up as well. So with your history in the district and being local and different things like that, what qualities would you think fit the district in terms of the superintendent?
As far as my present knowledge of the district? Well, and I don't know if this could be achieved because state laws, federal laws have brought a lot of this on. But I think Wall Township used to be very familial. The teachers, the administrators, we were a very close group. And I think a lot of teachers miss that. Just teachers that I've spoken to that are old enough to have experienced it back then. But that has escaped not only in Wall, it's escaped in a lot of districts. More importantly, I'd like to see somebody bring the district back up to as high as, back in the early 90s, the district was pretty high up there as far, it wasn't up there with Hadfield and Homedale and those places, but it was about in the mid-30s of the state as far as a K-12 school district academically. And I'd like to see that returned. It's nowhere near that now. It's close to 130 or 140 or something like that the last time I looked. And I'd like to see that brought back, and I'd like to see a superintendent who aspires to that kind of thing. I'd like to see a superintendent, I personally would, but again, my personal wants and desires may be different from what I get from the board, from the public, from the administrators, et cetera. But what I would like to see is I would like to see a person who's willing to make a commitment not to stay for 2.8 years, but, stay for 6, 7, 10 years. A lot of people don't do that now for good reasons, and I don't want to get into them. They deal with pensions, they deal with all kinds of things. But I would like to see a person who's that committed to the district.
Any other questions for Dr. Franceschini? I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Next up, we're going to have Strategic Educational Advantage, LLC.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Michael Kushar. I'm here with my partner, Dr. Frank Oriema. Together we make up Strategic Education Advantage. I am the superintendent of the South Bergen Jointure, an educational commission in northern New Jersey. I was a superintendent of a K-12 for 12 years. Overall, 15 years as a superintendent, 37 years in education. I am the past president of the New Jersey Association of School Superintendents, and also currently I'm the chair of the Secondary Commission in Middle States. We've been doing this search for over 5 years. Frank and I believe strongly in the process. We believe and we know that the most important decision a board can make is who they hire as their chief school administrator. And we know that having the right fit and helping you select the right superintendent makes all the difference for the all-important purpose of the children we serve. We also have just joined with NJASA and Rutgers University as key partners in the search process. And by having those key partnerships, we believe that we can do a very thorough, extensive search. We do a very rigorous process, and our process focuses around developing a profile. The Board of Education is elected to choose the superintendent. You as a board are doing a very admirable process by enlisting a search firm that's going to help assist you in the process so that you can get voice into the development of a profile. So Frank and I aren't coming with preconceived ideas of who should be there or what attributes. We have a very rigorous process to develop a profile of the next superintendent, of which will be the rubric by which we help recruit and screen candidates for the board's final selection. When people do not like a decision, it's very hard to question the decision, but they'll always attack process. Frank and I are going to ensure the most thorough of process and also ensure that every voice has a chance to have input into the profile. Dr. Oriema is going to explain the process.
The process itself is pretty clear in many ways. It starts out with an extensive planning session in which we work with the board to try to lay out things like timelines, due dates, targets, etc. As you enter into the winter season, of course, it's always a challenge in terms of scheduling things, having backup dates, etc. We believe very, very strongly in the issue of soliciting input as a means to eventually establishing the profile. And as you can imagine, that would include meeting one-on-one with each board member and getting their input as they see on 3 key items. And those are the strengths of the district, the areas in need of improvement, and the specific characteristic each board member would like to see in the new superintendent. And of course, that carries over into an online survey that we have been using in all of our searches. And the survey itself is really 2 components. It has a component of 10 questions that works on a scale of 1 to 5, in terms of 5 being the most important, 1 being the least. And those are questions that we can work with the board to try to develop. We have a whole series of them that our track record has proven to be desirable by districts. And they ask questions such as, should the superintendent be a standing superintendent before coming in? Should the superintendent have an earned doctorate? Should the superintendent live in or near the community? And those kinds of things. We often find that districts, as boards discuss these items, they come up with issues that are important for them that we could never anticipate. And they become part of this bank of 10 or 12 questions. But the online survey also includes the same 3 questions. What are the strengths of the district? What are the areas in need of improvement? And what are the specific characteristics? We call that together with all of the input that we're going to be receiving from the board, from the staff, and the staff includes all the administrators, all of the teachers, and all of the support staff. And when we say support staff, we mean the entire breadth of the support staff. Forums with parents, and that could be either parent leaders or parents in general. We find that it's important to have, because it is a challenge to get people out. In 2019, I'll echo what some of our colleagues said earlier, it is a challenge. But we find one way that's very effective is to have a morning session and then an evening session, so that people have an opportunity based upon their work, based upon their individual schedules, what day it is scheduled, to be able to attend one or the other. Some districts choose to have student input, and that would be fine. It could be done either via the form process, or it can be done relative to the online survey. And lastly, the community. The entire process centers around creating this profile. Once the profile is established, we use that to screen. And we have a very rigorous process, as Mike mentioned earlier. It goes far beyond questions. We have a lot of set scenario type questions in which people have to think on their feet. As former superintendents, we know that the superintendency is a really tough job. I've been retired now for 9 years, and I tell people all the time, I miss the job every day. I love doing this and the other things that I do, but I really do miss the superintendency. But it is a tough job. It is not one for the faint of heart, and you have to be able to think on your feet. And that's why we take great pride in the type of scenario questions we ask, where people have to do just that in a very real world type of setting. So all of those things help us to screen. And we make it very clear, especially at the public forums, we are not picking the superintendent. We are strictly doing and assisting the board in trying to screen the candidates so that they fit the profile, and we can pull forward to you 7, 8, maybe in a really good year 10 candidates. And then the board will use that same profile, and that we can move that process forward during the interview process. There are a lot of hills and valleys with this process. Sometimes candidates will go down the road only halfway and decide that for whatever reason this is not the job for them, maybe not the time for them, maybe not the place for them. So that's why keeping a nice, robust field is very, very important. And yes, every once in a while you might have to go out and interview again. So that all speaks to that developing the slate. The interview process is, as I said earlier, a two-part process with us handling both the screening and the board entering into the interview process. And then finally the selection. And there are components of this that we can give some guidance and suggestions to the board. But the overall process is one that needs to be transparent. Because as Mike said, without a doubt, if there's an issue, it's going to be an issue with the process. We do our utmost to keep the process clean, to keep it transparent. And never forget, if I've learned one thing in 50 years, this is my 50th year in the profession. If I learned one thing in 50 years, it's every district is unique. And it doesn't make a difference if you're in Bergen County or Westchester County or Nassau County or Monmouth County. Every district is unique, and the mistake you could make is to think you're going to lump them together, and they're not. And that's why we spend the amount of time we do to understand the uniqueness of each and every firm.
Just to summarize, we do have a 2-year guarantee. That's how strongly we feel in making a match and working with the board, that we'll stand behind our candidate for 2 years. And if things do not work out, we will do the search for free for 2 years. That's how strongly we feel about the rigorous process we put in place. Also in your packet is a copy of a timeline of a proposed wall search. And that is just indicative of the two-way communication we believe in, working with the Board of Education and the community, so that everybody is aware and the process is transparent, to the point, however, that the process must be confidential until we're down to the 2 finalists. So with that, that's a brief overview. We'll open it up to questions.
I'd just like to stay with my personal script with regards to something that you already mentioned and illustrated for us. Just to be clear, though, in terms of that community input and stakeholders, one of the things that I noted in your proposal was a mention of Rutgers, and I think you said something about it, but I'm still not clear. So what is this Rutgers survey or something like that, please?
So we're working with 2 organizations, the New Jersey Association of School Superintendents,
Right.
Rutgers University, Rutgers University Center for Effective Practice, and they work with us on the survey, culling the data, and helping us develop the survey and the profile. So they've been key partners with us.
And I'm a former education administrator, so they'll be responsive to your input, though, Rutgers, in terms of things that you don't like, and vice versa from us to you.
Well, again, it's not what Dr. Oriemmer and I like or dislike. It's about creating a profile based on the feedback. So again, we are going to take all our interviews, our focus groups, work with them after our meeting with the Board of Education in a planning meeting, and develop the instrument.
Okay. And then what is your approach with internal candidates?
That's a great question. I believe that if people meet the criteria and the requirements of the job, at the very least, they should be interviewed by the search firm in the initial round. And then we believe, again, strongly, as we develop a profile, Dr. Oriemmer and I, after we screen all the candidates and interview, will be proposing candidates to the board for your choice of who to interview, and we will give you, again, how they fit the profile, how they may exceed the profile, or maybe individuals that don't quite meet all the criteria of the profile, but maybe you should take a look at. So again, we will assist the board, but we're certainly not going to dictate to the board.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, you mentioned the profile that you build. What is your approach to find candidates for that profile? Do you have a pool of people from previous searches that you reach out to? Do you use LinkedIn to find people that meet that profile, or are you just a wait and see who applies to that profile type of firm?
Yeah, that is a great question. What we try to assure districts all the time is that we don't have a set stable of people, that we keep on going to back them over and over and over until we get them a job. It doesn't work that way at all. The profile is going to dictate that. At the rate of sounding less than modest, we have a pretty extensive net. We have a lot of years of experience throughout the tri-state area, and our familiarity with people from different districts will allow us to be able to tap in, and we will just spend a good afternoon taking a look at possible people that we know. But that's just a small segment, and then how you advertise is going to make the difference also.
Yeah,
And we also believe that the times is something you have to be very cautious about. The times one session could cost you more than you're going to pay any of the consultants in the room.
Russell, I just want to follow up on that. I really think it's a great question, and one thing I didn't mention in my background is one of my best jobs I ever had was being a high school principal, and it occurred to me, why aren't all the kids involved? Kids don't get involved in school for one reason: they weren't asked to be involved. Because every time I asked a student to get involved, they did. So I think that speaks to our search process. We develop a profile, and then we'll actively recruit people that we believe fit that profile. And I think that gets us the best candidates.
So just one more question. 2 very successful gentlemen like yourself, what excites you about making a trip over the Driscoll Bridge to the country every couple weeks to find us a superintendent?
Oh, first off, my wife and I have a home in a neighboring district in Seagirt. Secondly, we really love making matches. I think it's a great challenge and a great place. And we're certainly, with our partnerships, expanding through the state. And when we believe this is a key district, and we're really excited about the possibilities of working with the Wool Township Board of Ed.
With
Thank you.
regard to distance, it really just isn't an issue. I mean, we are right now deeply involved in a search in Rhinebeck, New York. To be fully transparent, that's a schlep for us, as the expression says, even from our homes. Mike lives in Bergen County, and I live right on the border of Bergen and New York. But it was a type of district that just excited us. And maybe we're just glutton for punishment in terms of time behind the wheel, but it just doesn't bother us at all.
One of our goals as a board is to make this process transparent for our community, and we really want to provide information on our website. Do you have any experience in your services of helping us give feedback to the public, and so that way they can have their input online as well?
Yeah, Aaron, I mentioned that two-way communication, and I just gave the first step in terms of a timeline. So we'll be communicating in our development process with the Board of Ed and talk about who's the point person for information after the board decides, and everything will be posted on the web, and that's a great way of transparency.
So I have a question. In terms of the process of how you take data from the forms and surveys and different things like that, how do you weigh that against what I'll term to as like human characteristics or traits that you might find valuable in a superintendent? So how do you take that data and...
Yeah, the data collection process, and Mike and I both teach doctoral students, and we employ some of those same strategies in the work that we do. So I think when you take a look at the survey, what you have to always look at are those 10 questions that I mentioned earlier that the board will develop, because they will tell you a lot of what you want to know. And then when you add those other questions about the strengths, weaknesses, and characteristics, that really rounds it out. What we do is we also employ a hard copy survey for people in the community, individuals who might not be able to access it. The key to all of that is how you disaggregate it. So when we disaggregate it, we're going to look at it in terms of employee responses, parent responses, et cetera. That helps you an awful lot to try to see the scope of what different groups are thinking. And that's what will ultimately wind up with the profile. So the analysis part is very, very critical. Some of it, of course, we have to do by hand. When we get back those hard copies, we have to fold them in statistically with the rest of the batch.
In summary, we used a mixed method. Frank is the statistician of the group. I'm more of the qualitative ethnographer. So together we do a rich description based on the interview and the notes, combine it with the statistical analysis of the surveys, and together we develop a really quality profile.
You have the artist and the scientist right there.
Absolutely. The beauty and the beast. You decide.
Any other questions from any board members? Gentlemen, I thank you for your time.
Thank you. We
Thank
wish you
for your
well.
time, and wish you only the best.
Our next presenter will be the School Board Association.
I will start out by saying I am different in at least one regard than the other presenters, and that is I have never been a superintendent. My name is Jane Kirschner. I'm the Director of Field Services for New Jersey School Boards Association. I was a board president for 14 years in Haddonfield. But none of that is equal to the kind of professional staff that I have. We have in the Field Service Department, we have 9 Field Service representatives and a few support staff. So when I come to you with the resources of the entire organization. I have been listening pretty carefully to the other interviews, and there are a number, as you would hope, similarities among all of us. There are some key differences, however. We have different levels of search. We have an executive search whereby we go through the first interviews ourselves. And then with the second and third, if there are to be that many, you would go through them, and we would be with you every step of the way for that. It is a process that is going to take a few months. It is something that the board needs to be serious about, which I can tell you are serious about, and you need to be committed to it. So we can work within any time frame, but my assumption was that you wanted to have a new superintendent by July 1st. Am I correct? Was that? So then we would end up doing that. As far as, if I may kind of jump ahead a little bit to save you from asking the same questions again, the community input, we do the same thing. We have a survey on the website. We do have forums for the staff, for the community, and for the administrators. And some of the forum is not just to get input from them, but it is to show your staff, your administrators, and your community a fair and credible process. So they get a chance to see me. They get a chance to see the people that you have selected to run your search. We explain the process. They are involved because of that. They understand exactly where we're coming from and what we would like them to do. As far as internal candidates, we encourage internal candidates, but there are some legal criteria that people have to meet before they become a superintendent in New Jersey. And one of them is they must have an administrator certificate. So if an internal candidate meets your criteria, absolutely, they should be interviewed. If they do not, we do not believe in courtesy interviews, because if they do not meet the legal criteria, then there's no way they could have the job. So we treat them seriously. We treat them like any other candidate who applies. It is a confidential process. A lot of that is because neighbors are going to apply. You are a desired district. Neighbors are going to apply, and they need to know that when they are going through this, their names are not going to be bandied about. We are known for keeping confidentiality because in the end, you are only going to get one person, and any of the rest of your candidates are going to have to go back into their own districts with their own boards. I had a couple of other things. I talked about a little bit about the credibility and fairness. For you to be successful, you need to be able to see, and so does your community, that you are engaged in a fair and credible process. We have been doing this process for many, many years. We have established a rich network of touching all boards across the state. Sometimes, if you look into your email, probably daily. We keep you up to date on all the goings in Trenton that would pertain to you and some of the decisions that you make. We also will have for 1 year, if the person you select does not stay, we will redo the search at no cost. We do the survey on the website. The legal criteria and the things that you want as a board in your superintendent are really the profile. So we start out with a profile for you at the same time that we are going to the community and to the staff to explain to them what you are going to do. If there are particular characteristics or attributes or strengths that you would like to see in your next superintendent, then we would know those also. When it comes to whittling down candidates, you're going to get a plethora of candidates who are going to apply. And some of them are going to have some of the special strengths and achievements that you want. Those people would rise to the top and be A candidates. Those people exceed your criteria. The B group are people who meet your criteria. So among those, you would get to choose who it is you would like to interview. We send out, we have a base of about 600 people who have applied through our organization, and every single one of them will get a notice of this vacancy. We belong to a network of national school board associations, and they each will get a copy of this vacancy. We do the same for them, and so it gets known and it gets about across the United States. We do not recommend going to the New York Times because, quite frankly, there is no reciprocity. You must have an administrator certificate, and if you don't have one and you're just beginning to get one and you want a job in New Jersey, oftentimes the timing does not match up. So we are very careful about trying to get people who already have the kind of qualifications and knowledge of New Jersey that you would like to see. I can answer questions. I know I'm the last one. I'm sorry I didn't bring chocolate. I think you might all be flagging a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that I answered every single one of your questions. I can tell you one thing that separates us from anybody else you could possibly interview for this job, and that is we are your association. We live and breathe and exist only to assist board members and districts. So that is the one thing that does set us apart. You're not shy, I know.
I am
I've
going to
sat
go
here.
off topic then. And since you did answer those other two questions, thank you. Your proposal has on page 15 a pricing plan for 4 different tiers. So if you might illustrate for us.
Yes.
And then I also have one more question.
Okay. The different tiers are, there is a $4,000 search. That is primarily reserved for very small districts who really don't have much money, but they really do need the kind of help that we have, and we do give it to them freely. There is the $7,000 search, and if you'll notice, there is a matrix along with those 4 prices, and you can see what the $7,000 search. Do you want me, for the sake of the audience, to go through that?
No, I just like, some of the highlights,
Okay, all right.
You don't have to go through the whole thing.
Okay. So for the 12-5 search, we end up doing the first round interviews. We have done them where the district has said we would prefer to do the first round ourselves, which is fine. And we are with you through every step of the process. We notify the people to come in. We are your interface. We are the person that represents you throughout the entire dealings. The $15,000 search is one that has a 3D strategic plan at the bottom of it. It was my understanding, and I might be wrong, aren't you about 2 years into a strategic plan?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know that that would be appealing to you. Some of the 12-5 might be appealing to you because it might indicate that you don't quite have that amount of time, and we can go through the first round ourselves. We would clear the questions with you, and we would give you specific feedback to anybody that we interview. So those are primarily the main differences. The $7,000 search, we would not necessarily be here for your interviews. The 12.5, we would be here with you throughout the interviews. We would work with you on questions. We would take some of the input that we got from your staff, your administrators, and your community, and we would fold them into some questions. I've never yet run a search whereby the staff did not want to be part of the interview process. While that's understandable, it is not allowed in this. It's a Board of Education decision. It's probably the biggest decision that you're going to make, and really you shouldn't be abrogating that responsibility. But for them to have some kind of input, they walk your halls, they're your educators, they know the kinds of characteristics they would like to see in a leader. So for those, we get that kind of information. They also are invited to fill out the survey on the website, and you get all of the results from the website. I would come in and give them to you specifically, so you get to see what everybody had to say on the survey. Should I go into more?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
With regards to the other question, again, not on my script.
Okay.
You mentioned that there's field service reps.
Yes.
So presenting tonight were the individuals that would be involved, it seems to me, directly. Are you the person that would be directly involved, or
Yes.
would it be one of those?
Yes, I would do the search. In fact, if you said to me, like the other gentleman here, you said, well, they've done like 5 searches or 6 searches or whatever, there's an entire page here. I have not done these 100 searches. My field staff have. But whenever we do a search, we always have backup and we always have another person. So I would be the lead, and then I might get another field service rep. However, it would not be the field service rep that you're thinking about. Well, you're very welcome.
Could you comment on the profile? The
I would-
profile?
the profile.
That you're going to,
I would come in and meet with you. We would set a calendar. It would be dated. There are a number of meetings that we would have to have, not necessarily with you, but there would be a search calendar. The search calendar could go on your website. So as far as being transparent, people would know when and what was being done at certain times. The profile, when I come in and talk to you, you kind of know what you want. There are ways of kind of pulling it out, but there are things like you may want a seated superintendent. I need to know that. With a district this size, I'm assuming that's true. You may have somebody who's an internal candidate who you think is absolutely wonderful. So that's the kind of conversation we would have. I'm not exactly sure what the gentleman meant by profile, except by the time you advertise, it will be the profile. It will be working with you to develop the specific legal language. And it would be taking some of the input from the community as to some of the characteristics. So all of that is kind of folded into one, but I don't come up with a profile. You do in a conversation with me. It is a consensus process. We are not going to come to the end of a process and have people say, well, 7 people voted for this person and 2 did not. It is critically important that you come to consensus. And I have a process for doing just that. Because once this is over, this is going to be a team that's going to take you into the future. And so if you're all agreed, there's an energy, there's a palpable energy. And after the search is over, we do come back in and do a transition workshop with you. Because really, success is about a relationship. It's about hearing what somebody's saying. It's about setting goals. It's about having a process and procedure for governing your school. And so to get that all off in the right way, we come in and do a transition workshop with you and the new superintendent. We're very good. And next time, if I meet with you again, I will bring chocolate. Guaranteed. So,
Yeah, so my question is, based on the history of Wall Township, do you believe that that will adversely affect the candidate pool over what's gone, which is, Wall's a great place, we all love it, but we have to recognize that over the last 20 years, we have not had a lot of success, might say, with superintendents and just the way the district is perceived in a lot of ways. And I'm just wondering, will there be qualified people that may say, you know what, I'm not touching Wall Township with a 10-foot pole? And I'm just getting your opinion on what your thoughts on that.
I know. Actually, it's not a snide answer, but somebody who would say, I wouldn't touch Wall with a 10-foot pole is not anybody you'd like. And people who are superintendents are in it because they have a passion for what they do. And so a district, you only see yourself. You only have time to go to your board meetings. We see lots and lots of board meetings. So what you may assume to be as super negative or being alone in a kind of negativity is not necessarily the truth. It just isn't. I guarantee you, and I did work in here, none of you probably remember that. It was way back, well, I'm not that old, but let's see, I think it was around 2001, Kathy Weber was your field service rep, and I came in and ran a workshop or two with her. You have good facilities. You have a community that's interested. You may need a way to come together and kind of soup up your processes and your procedures for governing, and there are ways to do that. I do not think you will have any trouble at all.
Jane, you mentioned the process of voting and us as a board coming to consensus. So 9 of us.
Are you saying that's impossible?
I'm just trying to clarify
okay.
that I heard you correctly, that's all. So you're saying that it needs to be a 9-0 yes vote for whoever we want to be the superintendent?
Well, I'll tell you this. Being a superintendent is exciting, but it's also a hard enough job that at the end, when you come out and vote, you're going to be voting in public. And so if you're going to have a superintendent candidate who sees that 7 people are really for him or her and 2 are not, they often won't come.
Gotcha.
So what we're going to do is we are going to talk through things, and I think we can. Some of it's in the conversation. Some of it's in the words we use. I have yet, and I was a field rep for 10 years before I became the department director, and I've done that for 13. I have yet to have a board not come to consensus. Now, you could go through a fair amount of the search, and you could say to me, really, it's a 5-4. We really don't see anybody here who's a real match. Then we go out and advertise again. There would be no charge for that. And I would stay with you until you got a superintendent.
Gotcha.
So it's, I don't know a lot of the specifics. I can hear that there's an undercurrent in these questions that are being asked. But I can also tell you from my experience that hiring a superintendent and going through the kind of process that I'm talking about is a very cohesive thing that a board does. In fact, if you have a board that's having difficulty, the best thing you can do is go through a superintendent search. Because we have to work together, we have to talk together, we will come up with something that everybody likes. I guarantee. I have been married a very long time to the same person. I know how to get things done, and I know how to stay in the relationship. So I can promise you.
No, I don't doubt any of that. I think what you're hearing, at least from my perspective, is there's 5 board members that just joined this board in the last 3 months. And so
Oh, who
we're
are
pretty
you?
naive to some of this. And so that's where some of these questions come from my perspective. So you were a board president for 12 years, you said?
14 in Haddonfield.
How many superintendents did you hire?
1,
And
2.
2. And how did you go?
2.
How did you go through the process when you were the board president?
We went through the process. It was about, actually, when we were talking about fair and credible, you know, we go throughout the state and we do a lot of training. You get notices about it. You were at workshop. It's not about knowing everything. It is about being seen as fair and credible. People like that will rise completely to the top. If that's mine, I'm going to pretend it's not. All right. Thank you. I thought I turned it off. I've lost.
Fair and credible. You were talking about
Yeah,
fair and
yes,
credible.
yes. I had somebody say something wonderful to me when I left my board, because I left my board to go to New Jersey School Boards Association, and you can't serve on a board and be a field rep. And one of the things that somebody said to me when I left, because I cared about them, you know, it's interesting, the president is just one of 9, but the president stands alone. And there is a number of responsibilities that a president has. And one of them is to assist in a cohesiveness and to help with people. And he said, you know, I don't know how you did it, but whenever we had tough jobs to do, you picked the right people to do it. I didn't pick the right people. They kind of wanted to do it. Do you know what I mean? There's also kind of interesting ways to set up committees. On our board, we had a number of committees, and as you may suspect, there were some committees that were more romantic than others, right? I mean, is the policy committee romantic? Look at you. Look, all right. But it's critical. And I would send something out, and I would say there was a high interest, medium interest, low interest, and everybody on the board had to pick 3. And I promised every single person that they would get at least one of their high interest committees. And for the entire time I was president, I was able to do it with one exception, and that was Jim Klein. I can still remember it. He just didn't have a, but it's not that I chose them to be on the committees, it's that they already had an interest and a desire to serve in that capacity. So it was less work for me, and everybody was happy. Did that answer your question, or did I kind of go off?
It was more than I was expecting, but the question wasn't good, so I'm going to re-ask it.
Oh.
When you were the president of the board, did you use the School Boards Association? Did you find your own person, or did you use a search firm? That's what I was asking.
When I became president, well, when I got on my board, and I had been out here for a few years, and I got on my board, and I got on for a reason, like each one of you got on for a reason. And it wasn't because there's no good TV on Tuesday nights in Wall. You know what I mean? Everybody has an agenda. I had an agenda. I got on, and within the first 2 executive sessions, I was stunned at how much my board knew. I was really shocked. I mean, they had all the same concerns. They were professional, and they just couldn't talk about it. We had an assistant superintendent in our district, and he was known as, if you will, the superintendent's henchman. Not a very attractive or likable title. And he applied for the job when the superintendent left. And the process that we went through had him come out head and shoulders above any other candidate that we saw. And he became the superintendent, and he was there for 26 years. So he was, when you have the right process and you go through it well, you will get a winner. Now, was that a hedge? Very well, thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Have I outstayed my welcome? Really? No? Candy next time.
I have one more.
Okay.
Might I say that Wall Township is a more romantic district, other than policy committee?
No, well, no, I understand that, but usually it's personnel is the one.
Right. No.
You know, or negotiations.
What I meant to say is, obviously all of us feel that Wall Township is a very special district. And so the question to you, with us being a very special district, what types of qualities do you think, in terms of your superintendent search and our superintendent search, would be more appealing towards this community? What special, I would say special themes that you would look for in a superintendent yourself?
Approachability, honesty, and I don't say that lightly. Body language is critical. So if you're talking to somebody, one of the things you look for is, are they looking you in the eye? Are they leaning forward a little bit? Are they a little bit passionate about what they're talking about? You can feel that when you're dealing with somebody. Some of the skills and talents and achievements are wonderful. But what you want is somebody who can come in and help make you better or help make you move off where you are right now. I can tell you, I don't mean for this to be a hedge, it may be a bit of a tangent. I did a search, and the district was in terrible financial troubles, and the only thing they wanted somebody to come in and do their finances. So they said they needed a superintendent who could really come in and deal with finances and get this district back, on its feet. They hired somebody. He was there for 2 years. He did exactly that. He was not a hail fellow well met. He was uncomfortable meeting with people. So there is no man. There may be a woman for all seasons, but I know there's no man for all seasons. And so when it was time, they parted. He said, I can't do this anymore. You're in good shape. We've done what we wanted to do. I'm moving on. And the board said, thank you so very much. And then they went on to the next phase and got somebody that they thought could lead them then. Some of why I can't specifically answer your question is because I don't know what it's been like lately here. I can tell from some of the questions that you are not satisfied. I can tell by the fact that there's 4 or 5 new board members that there's been some kind of disruption. So I would know that at the beginning. Did that answer it?
Yes, thank you.
You sure?
Your first initial response was fantastic. That was what I was looking for. Thank you. Any other board members have any questions for Mrs. Kirshner? Okay.
Is that it?
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you don't have to stay much longer after this. Oh, yeah, Hopefully, I will see you again. If I do not, I wish you really the very best. It was the best thing I ever did, serve on a board of education. It wasn't all lollipops, but I sure learned a lot. Thank you. And I already know you're doing something right, because I knew that the president was conflicted. I also knew that the recommendation would be for him to get up and leave the board table and sit in the audience, and he did that. So you're better than you think you are. Sir, thank you back on.
Welcome Mr. Ralph Adenuzio back to the dais.
Okay. Any old business? Anybody have anything? Nope. Any new business? Oh,
I would just like to remind people of the football game this weekend and come out and support Wall. We had a great athletic season with all of the teams, not just football. So one more time, to all of them, congratulations. But we're not done. So we got one more, and that's that.
10 a.m. Sunday at Rutgers in Piscataway.
There you go.
Okay.
Ralph, I would just like to throw out as a future discussion, obviously not now, but I would like to recommend that the board openly discuss the hiring policies 3100 and 4100 that are out there, and I'm not sure how that gets pushed through the process, but I want to put that out there for our future discussion.
We'll add that for next week's policy.
Thank you.
What was it? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The hiring policies?
The hiring policies, yeah. To that end, if people were noticing the board writing, we are taking this job very seriously. Collectively, we've all worked to develop a process to help us with review of the proposals. We're all using it in our own way, but there is that subcommittee that's helping to steer, and it is consensus and something that we are all doing together. And Chris is at the helm.
I'll also mention the rubric that Erin made, and I thank her for that, and it's going to be very helpful in the process. So thank you, Erin.
Anybody else? No? Okay. Seeing none, we will open up public comment. Mr. Aaron, you can use the mic up on top if you want, if it's easier. You're welcome.
Can you hear me okay? All right, Kathleen Duran, Wall Township. Ralph, I appreciated that you had recused yourself due to the conflict, but I do believe it extended to the submissions of the parties, and I did notice you paging through the proposals, and I don't think that you were supposed to be reviewing them. So you may want to not take your copy with you. Do a brain wipe. Forget you saw the document. We'll do the Vulcan mind wipe, please. And I'm very concerned about the lack of a vote this evening. I was watching the interviews by live stream on my way in, and I found it very problematic that you mentioned that there had been no unanimous vote, because the other times I've watched you report on the voting, there was no need to have the membership vote be unanimous. So I'm not sure why tonight it had to be unanimous. Is there a reason? Or do you want me to hold all the questions till the end?
Consensus. I'm sorry, I misspoke. There wasn't a consensus.
Well, with the idea of being transparent, I don't know what that means whatsoever. So does that mean like the board was split 50-50? Does it mean you didn't have a 51% majority? What does consensus mean?
We weren't able to get 5 affirmative votes for any one person.
Okay. Are you able to tell me what the breakdown was? Not by person's name, but in general? No, I can't, sorry. Okay. What I'd also like to speak about in terms of the vote, I would like to request that the board take Board of Education meeting attendance into consideration on your next round. Because of the 3 candidates, I noticed that, of course, Betsy Cross is the only candidate remaining here who stayed to follow the superintendent's search, along with the board members. And that, right now, is a key task of the board. I mean, really, I don't think there's anything more important right now on your plate. And the other candidates left, and I found that very concerning. I actually thought one of them was just going to take a call and come back, and that didn't happen. But I got to ask, when I got here and saw them, I'm like, who are these people? I've been coming for a couple of years now, and I've seen one of the other candidates maybe 2 times here, and I've never seen the other one here even come to a board meeting, and to not stay for the search which as painful as it might be to sit through Board of Education meetings sometimes, that's what it's all about. And I hope that you take Board of Education attendance at meetings to be a very important indicator of the success of the candidate. And I also want to, I mean, not for nothing, a lot of you are new, you don't know what's transpired over the past few years, but the gauntlet has been thrown down, not just to Betsy, also to me along the way, but repeatedly people have spoken out loud, including the past president, and said, Betsy, if you care so much, why don't you run? Well, 2 or 3 years of hearing that, she's finally thrown her hat in the ring, and you can't reach a consensus on putting her on the board. I have to wonder why. Because it's been stated out loud by board members in response to her asking questions all the time. If you care so much, run. She runs, and you don't reach a consensus. I just feel like throwing my hands up in the air. And I got to wonder why. Is it because you can't answer her questions? I don't know what it is, or why after throwing down the gauntlet so many times that it's not being picked up. So I'd like to see the board put its money where its mouth is, so to speak. You know, you have someone who cares deeply, who's brought numerous things to the attention of the public. And I'd like to see that long-term interest and caring taken into consideration when you go through your next round of interviews. Thank you.
Betsy Cross, I live in Wall Township. Wanted to go over the superintendent search. I'm just not sure why you didn't go over the pricing for all the firms. You only went through the last firm, so I'm hoping that there's an indication of that's who we're leaning towards. If you know the numbers, could you tell us the numbers now so we have it on the record? And Ralph, you did have a copy of the presentation, you know, I'd like to see a copy of that presentation. And Aaron, if we're looking to be transparent, maybe put the presentation online for everybody to see. Maybe we should take a vote. You know, I think you only had 19 people watching tonight. But maybe those 19 and the people that were here tonight that actually stayed should have an input on who you're going to pick. I know who I'd pick. But first I need to know the pricing. But what else? I think that third firm didn't go over the towns that they were working on. Couple other things. In addition to the pricing, you know, can you call the last 3 schools that they did searches for? Can you ask that? You know, I think that's important. So I would like to know that. And what is the time frame for picking the firm? I mean, it's December. To get somebody in here by July, you're way, way behind. And I mean, and you couldn't even pick a Board of Education member tonight. How can we trust you to pick a superintendent? How could this take so long? I mean, yeah, honestly, the other 2 people left. So maybe somebody thought they were a shoo-in, and, you know, I don't know. I can't even understand it. So yeah, a lot of people have been saying it over and over again. Betsy, run, Betsy, run. I'm here. What are you doing back there? Can you not answer the questions when I'm back there, and you can't answer them when I'm up here? Something is terribly wrong. This is 4 times now that I can't be sitting over there. And, you know, I think we will have a limited pool. And I don't think it's because they don't want to come here because of the teachers or the administration. I think we're going to get people not coming here because of the Board of Ed. You can see these people, they run, they get off. They run, they get off. They say they're going to be here. Yeah, they say they're going to be transparent. They say they're going to be accountable. They get up here and it's the complete opposite. So that's going to limit the pool for sure. And then, you know, we talk all about sports. Yes, we have great sports. But, you know, what's happening, you know, we had a fall play. We didn't have the superintendent show up. We didn't have one Board of Ed member show up. and you asked to have a row of seats reserved, and the kids all saw that. You didn't have one person there. To not hear anything about the play, these kids are killing themselves. So that's extremely disappointing, and I want to see, you know, all the kids that applied for this program that they're interviewing on Saturday, if it costs more than $10,000, I think you need to pay it. $10,000 out of $77 million is peanuts. It was like the Hunger Games last year. Yeah, so many important things. If you're looking to hire somebody to do the investigation for the Central School trailers, you know, what's going on with that? I mean, you weren't even talking about it in F&F, and you were looking to spend $450 an hour when, you know, the kids can't go to this great program in Monmouth County to learn how to sing. We got to get our priorities together. I want to sit up there on behalf of the kids. We got enough people sitting up there for the teachers and the administrators and everybody else. I want to be sitting up there for the kids. Good night.
Good evening, Gail Marr, WTEA President. I was disappointed with most of the companies that spoke tonight. The WTEA members have been injured by the current superintendent for over 5 years. And to even think we would think of the same company that brought her here is crazy in my mind. The lovely lady from school boards doesn't even know what's going on in Wall, except she said she represents you guys. But she doesn't know what we've been through. Although it doesn't matter, and you probably don't care, we can't support anyone that supported the current superintendent. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? Seeing none, close public comment. At this time, we have a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
For items G and H under number 14. And no action will be taken when we come back. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.